So this is week 4 of the Vim training classes, and before we go over what we're going to go over this week, let's quickly talk about what we went over last week. So last week we went over the more advanced motions and commands in Vim, stuff like CI and text objects and tilde and G tilde and all the random registers that you have to deal with and different ways to yank and put and assign to registers. Different advanced motions we went over, stuff like the paragraph motions, which are really useful for moving around code, and then syntax specific motions like right bracket, and left bracket, which, for example, in PHP, if you're in a PHP file, it's going to move you between functions. And one of the most useful is the %, which will move you between a matching brace or bracket or paren. Really useful stuff. Miscellaneous commands like indenting, centering the screen, redoing, undoing. We went over that in the first week, but just went over that again. And then lastly, managing files with tabs. I think I mentioned last week, but the video doesn't exist, so I'll go over it again. I teach tabs the wrong way. So if you want to use windows and buffers as the help files tell you to, by all means, go learn it that way. I just think it's easier for people to use tabs and move around tabs as if you would tabs in a browser like Chrome, for example. That was pretty much it. So this week, we are going to go over the kind of plugin structure of Vim. Like, what is inside that .vim directory that I've not explained anything about yet? What does the VimRC look like? How can I customize my VimRC? How can I make my own mappings? What are macros? How do I assign macros? How do I execute macros? I am going to link you to a great book about writing Vim script so you can create your own plugins. And then lastly, I'm going to go over how to manage your plugins, the plugins I use, and where to find more plugins. So without further ado, we'll start it off. So if you are just looking in your .vim directory, it might have fewer files or directories than I have. There's just a few directories that you really have to worry about if you're dealing with Vim. The first is the colors directory, which is probably the first one that people run into when they customize Vim for the first time. And that's exactly what it sounds like. In that directory, you'll find all the color schemes that you have available to you. So if I just go into mine and look into it, notice I only have about 7 color schemes in here. But if I open up Vim and I do color, you'll notice I have a bunch more. And I have no idea where they came from. Where they do come from, however, I was joking, I know where they come from. So if I look in user share Vim, and this is usually Vim / then the Vim version, so in this case it's going to be Vim 7.3, and then this is all of the default configurations that are on your system. This will usually have a default VimRC, it'll have a default list of plugins, the different syntaxes that you'll use to get extra functionality when you open up a file of a particular syntax, default mappings, indent plugins, and color schemes. So you can think of this as the default settings for Vim. And then anything you want to override is going to go in your Vim directory, which is in home.vim. That directory almost certainly exists if you have Vim installed. If it doesn't, just make it. And next to the .vim directory, not inside the .vim directory, but next to it, is where your VimRC lives. So that's in home/.vimrc. And mine is full of a bunch of stuff that I'll go over later. But those are the 2 main directories when you're dealing with Vim. Now, if you're using GVim, there is one other file, and that is going to be .gvmrc. So if you want to have GVim behave differently than Vim. For example, you want GVim to have a different color scheme or different mappings or something of that sort. You can put those into .GVMRC instead of .vimrc, and it'll only be read when opening GVim. Now, I believe it's the case that it will also read VimRC and then just use GVMRC to apply overrides. Now, with that said, you can do stuff like detecting if you're in a GUI version of Vim in your VimRC without making a .gvmrc file, but we'll go over that a bit later. So now inside the .vim folder, there are about 2 other directories that you really have to worry about. There's the plugin directory and the syntax directory. Now the syntax directory you almost never have to worry about unless you're dealing with a broken syntax plugin, which you're going to run into if you do anything with JavaScript or anything with PHP or anything with HTML. So if you find that you're writing some JavaScript or HTML or PHP and suddenly the syntax highlighting becomes out of sync with what you're actually working on, you might want to look around for an updated plugin that maybe has the new tags or the new functions or new syntax that's associated with the version of the language that you're using. For example, if I go into my syntax directory, I have a bunch of overridden syntax files. So I have html.vim and javascript.vim and php.vim. And because those already existed, as I mentioned before, in user share vim vim73 syntax, I'm simply overriding that functionality in my home directory. So any questions on the colors directory or the syntax directory?
If your .vim directory is empty.
Is what?
Empty.
That is completely fine. Then if it's empty, that just means you're going to be using the default functionality that is in user share vim vim7 then version.
I wanted certain color schemes, and I just added the colors directory
Yeah.
right into that.
Yeah. If you don't have these directories, for example, if you want to have your own color schemes, just create folders with these names, and then Vim will look in there.
Do you know what a .netrwist directory is?
That is the netrw history. Netrw is a plugin for Vim, and then that's just like has a bunch of different stuff in there. So when you open netrw again. Yep. So the next 2 are plugin and bundle. So these 2 directories, possibly 1 directory, are where plugins go. Now plugin is what Vim actually uses. If you're not using pathogen or bundle, which I'm going to go over in a second, and you want to install a plugin, for example, if I just go to www.vim.org and wait for it to load, and then pick some random script, DWM for example, there are going to be instructions on how to install it. So here you can see copy the dwm.vim into home.vim plugin. So all you need to do to install a plugin is download the file and put it into plugin. That's it. And then when you open up Vim, it'll start running. Now, the problem comes in when you're dealing with something, a plugin, for example, that needs to be in a bunch of folders. So let's see if I can find an example on here. Let's see. This one might have it. Yeah. So, no, that's just a single file. I think I have one that's multiple files. Nope, that is not how I spell my .files. this one almost certainly has it here.
Nerd tree.
Right. So you'll see for this plugin, it has multiple directories. It has a syntax directory, it has a plugin directory, it has a doc directory. Now the annoying thing is, if you're downloading a plugin, you have to manually put all the files in the right places. So that's where things like pathogen come in, and that's what the bundle directory is. So if you're using pathogen, I'm going to explain in more detail. All you have to do is do something like a git clone on a repo, and that repo will contain all of the files. So we'll see here, I have my bundle directory, and inside my bundle directory I have a nerd tree directory, and inside that directory is everything about the plugin. It has a doc directory, and inside there it has its own doc folder and plugin and syntax, etc. So pathogen and bundle are just tools to make installing plugins easier, because it is a pain in the ass if a plugin has a bunch of different files all over the place. So those are the main ones. After is a directory that you'll almost never have to worry about. I have a file in after, and I treat it as, this isn't really worthy of a plugin, but I want this to be activated. So for example, I have syntax check, and any file that you put in after is going to be, it's essentially another plugin directory. It's just under a different name. And I just treat it as things that aren't quite plugins, but I want them to be executed anyway. So these 4 directories here are built into Vim. If they don't exist, you can create them with this name and Vim will see them. This directory is only for pathogen, but we'll go over that in a bit. So any questions on the VMRC or the .vim directory or anything like that?
So does after, like, is it like specific that it actually runs after you save a file or something?
Well, no, it's just after everything else is loaded, then the files in there get loaded in.
What is the top 1 or 3 sources of, things you can customize Vim, like vim.org or wiki.vim or
Vim.org is probably the best one. There is also, I'm trying to remember, there was a great website I found the other day. It was like, it wasn't vim.org. It was like vimplugins.org or something. It was something, oh, I evidently show up there. Something really weird. But www.vim.org is definitely, I check that every day just to see what's new like to see what new color schemes come up and see if I like them. And then you can see the top rated plugins ever. So if you go to vim.org and then scripts, you can see the most recent scripts. And if you click more, you can do stuff like sort based on the best ones ever. So if I search here, you can see nerd tree is the second best tag list. This color scheme, or this, no, this is to make Rails act better. Snipmate is snippets, and then this is the highest rated color scheme ever, is Molokai, which I used to use, but I do not anymore. So yeah, you can go through there, and all of them will have install details. That's just a requirement when you upload a script. Though many of them just say, like a lot of mine just say, see GitHub. Because if you're actually maintaining scripts, vim.org is a terrible website. Like, it's just not fun to use. So most of the time they upload one version and then they say, for updates, see GitHub, which works for me, especially if you're using pathogen. So any other questions on those? All right. I'm going to go over in more detail what pathogen is in a second. But the next big one is mappings. So mappings is exactly what they sound like. The homework for the first class was a mapping, if you remember. Mm-hmm. So if you open your VimRC, you should have something like this from your first homework. And I have NO, INO, and VNO. And what those just stand for is no remap, I no remap, and V no remap. Now, if you're trying to create a mapping, the easiest way to do it is just nmap, imap, and vmap. So this is map in normal mode, map in insert mode, and map in visual mode. Now let's do something really simple. So what mappings do in Vim, as you might have inferred from the homework, is the first argument you give it is the key that you're going to press. The second argument that you give it is a command or set of commands that is going to run when you hit that key. Now the thing to keep in mind is that based on the type of mapping you're doing, you have to take into account that when you do your mapping. For example, if I do nmap and I just do something like trying to pick a key that doesn't have much use. Let's do, actually I already have a mapping. Let's find one. Yeah, I can just do this one. This makes sense. Right here. So I have nmap di comma. So it doesn't have to be a single key. It can be a sequence of keys. So all this means is anytime I press in normal mode, di comma is going to execute this string of commands. So in this one, it's just deleting an argument. So function some stuff, arg1, arg2, arg3, arg4. And then if I do di comma, it's going to delete inside the argument. Or ci comma, it's going to delete inside the argument. Now, the reason I mentioned that you have to take into the type that you're doing, like you can see nmap here. Oops, sorry. And then I have imap. Now nmap, I'm in normal mode. So if I want to get into command mode, I just hit colon, right? And then I can execute tab next and then carriage return. So you have to be super specific. So if you want, for example, control tab to do command mode tab next, you have to remember to actually press enter, which is carriage return right here. Now with imap, I'm in insert mode. So if I want to get into command mode, how do I get into command mode? I have to hit escape first. So for example, if I'm in insert mode and I hit control tab, I'm mapping that to hit escape first, then type the word colon tab next, then hit enter. Now this is super powerful because you can remap any set of keys to do anything you want. For example, with the first homework, I just completely disabled all your arrow keys just by doing nop, which is no operation. I don't know of many other editors that let you remap keys so easily and so robustly. So let's go over what I said the first week. So now that we're in the fourth week, I'm going to have you guys put these two mappings in there. So right now, yours probably says this, right? I want it to say this. So what do you think these two things will do?
That means you're going to actually then, you're going to delete your line and then paste below it?
Right.
Okay.
So when I hit down, it's going to do this. It's going to move the current line I'm on down. And if I hit up, it's going to move the current line I'm on up.
That is easy. Yeah, you showed us that feature. The file is called mappings Vim. You're not in VimRC.
Well, if I go into my VimRC,
Okay. You source it.
I just source it. Like I just say, just pull it. This is just how I organize it. I'll go over that in a second.
I got lost. Thanks.
Yeah. So if you want to see my mappings, they're up on GitHub. So if you go into my .files in .vim and then in the startup directory. Now this startup directory isn't a Vim thing. I just made this directory and called it startup. And then I have a bunch of files in here, for example, mappings.vim. And you can see all my mappings in here. So if the best one that I found is stuff like creating convenience keys, like motions that don't auto center, but I want them to auto center. Like if I hit Shift G, I want it to auto center, and it doesn't do that by default. So you can make it do that by default by remapping the key to do the key, then also the command to center, which is ZZ. Now, in addition to IMAP, NMAP, and VMAP, which are the modes in which you're going to map, there's this concept of a leader. And all that is a key that you use to prefix commands. By default, it's \. So with this mapping, I have leader single quote. So if I'm writing something, some string, and I do leader single quote, which is \, single quote, is going to put 2 single quotes down, hit escape, and then put me in insert mode. So it's just going to create 2 single quotes and then put me in between them. So if I do \, quote, I'm now inside the quotes. There's just some convenience keys. Same thing for double quote and parentheses and brackets. So var sum array equals some stuff. And then I'm inside. So the leader key is nice because it gives you a namespace for doing your mappings. Instead of like, if I wanted to do this, I could do something like IMAP, and it would do the same thing. But maybe I want double quotes sometimes, and I don't want it to do my mapping. That's what the leader key is for. So you can, as I said, namespace your keys as to not pollute the global space of keys. Most plugins that you use that create mappings will use your leader to begin. For example, like I showed earlier with EasyMotion's mapping is leader than any of the normal motions, like leader F, for example. So \F and then X, and then it will execute that. So if you're creating mappings, ask yourself whether you want to change default functionality, like Shift G to Shift GZZ, or you want to add onto functionality, and in which case you probably want to use a leader. Is there any questions about creating mappings or what mappings can do or anything like that?
I kind of missed a little bit on the end of the leader part. So leader actually is like a global part?
So leader is just a customizable key that you can set, and it can be whatever you want. It's just, by default, it's \.
Okay.
And it's just a way for you, while creating mappings, to have a configurable namespace, a insertion point that a lot of plugins can share, so you don't pollute the global space of mappings.
Okay.
The way I usually consider it is, like I said, if I'm changing default functionality, like G to GZZ, I won't use a leader. But if I'm doing additional functionality, like I want, when I hit a quote, to put in 2 quotes and put me inside them, I will use a leader, like just that. And now you can customize your leader, and most people actually customize it to be comma because it's just a lot easier to hit than \. Leader. So in your VimRC, you would do let map leader equal comma, and then instead of having \, you would just have comma, and then that would change across all your mappings that had this replacement in it. So you wouldn't have to, I mean, you could do this.
Gotcha.
But then if you wanted a different key, you'd have to go across all of the plugins and everything.
And if you never change your leader and it's still \, so you're saying when you say leader there, you're saying use \.
Yeah.
You're telling it to use \.
Right. But if I went into my VimRC and I just did let map leader equal, and then
now it's comma.
Then load it up again, it would just be comma. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also noticed that you used the two different formats for Nmap, Mmap, and NO, right?
Yeah.
Or NM.
Right. So there's for all of the IMAP, Nmap, and VMAP,
Okay.
there's also I no remap, V no remap, and N no remap. And I think
Oh, the
Yeah.
versions or
yeah. So the difference is
they're right below in the help file. Okay.
one allows you to remap. So if I just did Nmap leader S, and then a plugin came along and wanted to redefine that, it would just overwrite it. So what the no remap does is say, don't let anything
Customize further.
right. So if you see here,
It's like making something.
you have
less final.
you have a left hand side and a right hand side. So if I have something that says every time I hit SB, it's going to put in the sequence CB. Now, if someone made a mapping that said every time I hit CB, put in AB, now every time I hit SB, it would put in AB, which would be really weird. And you'd be like, why the hell is that happening? So that's where no remap comes in. So they just don't that lets you lock in the right-hand side of the mapping so that people can't remap the right-hand sides to do something else.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
I just noticed, like, because in this file, there's both forms.
Yeah, all of these should be should be no remap, but I
Okay.
have no reason, no rhyme or reason. If there is, it's probably because I've stolen most of this from other people. So just some helpful mappings like my G and N and my motion commands. I have G O and G Control O, or rather G Shift O and G Control O. So you know the O and Shift O keys, which are create a new line. O, lowercase o, is create a new line below the current line. And Shift O is create a new line above the current line and put me in insert mode. The problem is sometimes I'm going to create a new line above and below, but not go into insert mode. So that's what I made these mappings for. So if I do G Shift O, and the reason I did Control and Shift is Shift is the top key, Control is the bottom key. So if I do G Shift O, it's going to create a line above the line I'm currently on, but not put me in insert mode. And likewise with G Control O, it's going to create a line below the line I'm on, but not put me in insert mode.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So mappings are just a really handy way to do stuff like, man, I really wish it,
I'm just trying to do that.
yeah, I really wish I didn't have to keep typing stuff over and over and over again. Like if you find yourself typing O escape K over and over and over again, just create a mapping.
And these are Nmaps, so that's going to be all the normal modes.
Yeah, that's only normal mode. I have very few insert mode mappings because there are better ways to accomplish that.
True.
And the way to accomplish, okay, so before I go over insert mode mappings, any questions on mappings at all before I go over
Nmap, IMAP, what was the other one?
VMAP? So normal mode,
Oh,
insert
okay.
mode, and visual mode.
There's other modes too, right?
Those are the three main.
Well, there are other modes. There's X mode and there's
Yeah.
block visual selection and stuff like that. So any questions on those? All right. So the next kind of mapping is not really a mapping. They're called insert abbreviations. And you can think of them as mini snippets. A lot of people use them for typo correction, but sometimes they'll do stuff like inserting their name or their email address or something. So what you do is you do IABBR, I abbreviation, and very much like mappings, the left-hand side is going to be what you type, and the right-hand side is going to be the replacement. So if I do email, and then on this side do my email address, every time in insert mode, when I type the word email, then hit space or some other letter character, it's going to replace that with my email address. So if I just manually assign it here, email. If I do, my email is, it's really, really handy. Most people do this to fix typos. So you can do IABBR, true, and IABV are false.
Oh,
Right.
All the time.
Yeah.
They'll just fix it for you.
So
that's cool.
Yeah.
I need an abbreviation for CIM to Vim.
hmm.
I need an abbreviation for CIM to Vim in the shell.
That's where aliases come in, though. My favorite one of that is do you know about SL? Like if you've ever typoed LS. So there's SL, which is steam locomotive, and what you do is you install that, and every time you typo LS with SL, it makes this ASCII art train go across the screen.
Nice.
So someone made one the other day that was when you typo Git to be GTI, it makes a Volkswagen GTI Golf go across the screen.
Still, SDR is still going strong.
Oh, that's awesome.
But anyway, those are the main mappings that you'll usually do in your normal workflows. You'll probably, I don't recommend just going to my mappings file and just pulling everything down. Mappings are one of the many things that you're going to build over the years in doing Vim, because they're a very naturally growing thing. They're a very organic thing in Vim, because you'll just be working and be like, I am annoyed that I keep typing this. So then you'll just find a mapping for it. So any questions on any of those? Stop that. Okay. No questions? Sweet. All right. Now macros are an absurdly powerful thing. And I briefly covered this last week, super briefly. But like I said, the video doesn't exist. I'm sorry. So macros are, you can kind of think of them as bits of commands that you assign to a buffer that can be executed at will. So for example, I find myself doing, hypothetically, the following a lot. I'll have a function just make a few of these. Right? And let's say I always want to delete, or I always want to replace arg4 with arg2. So I can select this bit and then paste it before and delete that and do that, right? If I have to do that a lot of times, it's going to get super annoying. So that's where macros come in. Now there are two stages of a macro. The first stage is recording a macro, right? So all you do is you press Q, and you'll notice that it says recording down at the bottom. Before that, the argument to Q is the register that you're assigning it to. So if you do QA, it's going to assign whatever you're doing to the A register. So you can, which is, the implications of that are really interesting, and I'll say why at the end. But suffice it to say, the argument to Q is the register you want to assign it to. So if I do QA, and then just do things. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to move it over here, delete that. Right. And then when you want to stop recording, you hit Q. Now it should be noted that it doesn't matter what you do while you're in this macro. I can start recording, and then I can get out of it. Normal mode, I can go into insert mode, I can go into command mode and execute commands, I can open up a new tab and start doing things, and as long as you're recording, it's going to capture all that stuff. Now, like I said, it recorded in the A register. So if I look at my registers, A has all of the commands I did. So all Q does is start recording all the commands I did and then put them into a buffer. So I can see that I started visual selection mode, I used L 5 times to get to the end of a word, and I cut that. I moved to the end of the line, I pasted it, then I moved over, deleted 2 characters, moved over some more, and then put in a comma, right? So if I want to execute that again, you're going to use the @ sign. So we use Q to record, and then @ to execute. Now if I just do @A, you'll notice that let me undo and redo that so you can see that it happened. You're going to see that it just did the same thing, right? So you just do @ and then the register that you want to specify, @A.
So like if you know you're going to be doing something a lot, like for in one instance, you
Yeah.
can hit Q, do it once, and then just add
Right.
what the register you assigned it to.
Right. Now, the cool thing about this is the following. Let's say I have, I'm trying to think of a good example. I have Sean Biddle test stuff and test stuff Biddle Sean and stuff test Biddle Sean and Biddle Sean test stuff. So I have these 4 lines. And let's say I want to just remove the 3rd bit from the CSV, right? I just want to delete, in this case test, in this case Biddle, and then test. I could do the following. df, comma, down. diw, x, or x, and then df, comma, and then df, comma, right? I could have done that. But say I have 1,000 lines of this. What you want to do is figure out how to do it the right way on the first line. So there's a wrong way and a right way to do it. The wrong way to do it is to start here and press L until you get to the comma, right? And then visually select and then cut it. That's the wrong way to do it. The right way to do it is to find the comma you want. In this case, we want the 2nd comma. So we want to do 2f, comma, right? And then we want to move over 1 because we want to be at the start of the word. And then we want to delete until the next comma. Then we do df, comma, right? Now, here's where you have to have the foresight when you're creating a macro to make it repeatable. So now what you want to do is you want to move down a line and move to the start. So you do J0. Then you stop recording. So let's do this. I'm going to start recording and save that to the A register. So I'm going to do the same thing. 2f, comma, L, df, comma, J0, Q, right?
Yeah.
Now I can do comma or @A and then it'll repeat it. Or I can do 3 @A and it will do it 3 times.
That's awesome.
That is why macros are so powerful. Because this could be 1,000 lines, 8,000 lines, and you just saved yourself so much time. But like I said, you have to make sure that you do it right the first time. Because if I did this, if I record and then I could even move down a line, and then if I stop recording, I just broke it, right? So you have to make sure that you're doing it right the first time. So practice on the first line, and then, I mean, even if you're taking some time to practice, you're still going to overall save a ton of time over manually editing thousands of lines. So any questions on recording macros or executing macros?
Can you edit the macro that's saved? Like if you want to adjust it?
You can, but that is part of what I'm going to say right now. So as I mentioned, when you specify a register like QA, it's simply assigning to a register. Now, you can modify registers. I'm now editing a register. So if I just do actually, let's do this. And do reg. I've now modified my register. So you could even do something like this. I'm going to go into insert mode. I'm going to do right. I'm going to select this. I'm going to assign it to the B register. Now I can see reg. It's right here. Now I'm going to execute that as a macro. Because all macros look for is a register. So you could type out the commands that you wanted to execute. And if I just do @b, oh, I forget to hit. You have to, if you're executing a macro, you actually have to give it the correct keys. You can't do this. There you go. Crazy stuff. So yes, you could modify it to answer your question. You just have to, you do a let at, and then the name of the register, equals, and then whatever you want it to be.
Quotes.
Quotes or quotes. I don't think it matters.
That would need practice, but we talked about that with the registers probably, like modifying the registers
Yeah.
in some way, but will we assign one register to another?
Yeah, if you want to assign one register to another, it's a lot easier than that. It's just let at, for example, C equal @A. Now if I do reg, you'll see that it actually assigns it the same thing. Super useful stuff. So any questions on macros? They are, you rarely use them, but they are incredibly powerful. So the kind of thing that you just have to remember exist, and remember that you'll probably have a use for them in the future. But I think in the entire time I've been using Vim, I've used macros maybe a handful of times. But the times I have done it, it's saved me hours and hours of work. Stuff like, I remember we were doing localization for our code base, and we had to get a file, find all of the things that searched for .l as a function with its first argument being an uppercase string, and take that and put it into another file, take all of those, put into a big array, followed that by a certain value, which was in another file. So what I did was I had a macro set that would go over every file in the directory. It would open that file up. It would open its appropriate translations up. It would scan the file for functions that called with an uppercase letter. It would take that out. It would put it in a third file that was into an array. It would take the appropriate translation out and put it into that third file. And I did this automatically. I think I ended up doing something like 400 @A to execute that. It's just like, oh, all my translations are done. It was really awesome. Like, when you have those moments in Vim, it's like, ah, so cool.
That is kind of awesome. And
Okay.
You can just chain all your commands, making a new file.
Yep.
This file,
Yep.
look for that.
Yep. All right. Next is the basics of Vim scripting. And I'm not going to tell you how to do Vim scripting because an awesome book exists, Learn Vim Script the Hard Way, .stevelosh.com. It is a very large book. It is a very detailed book. It is a very thorough book. And it is super awesome if you're trying to write a plugin or you're just trying to figure out how to do Vim script. Because Vim script is the language that Vim uses to do its configuration. It's how plugins are written. It's how mappings are done. It's just everything that Vim is, aside from actually editing, is done in Vim script. With that said, there are ways to use Python and Lua and other languages to actually make plugins, but those tend not to be the most popular because they require Vim to be compiled with those features. So they lower their audience for that. Anyway, go find this book. If you're interested, read the book, and then you'll be a master at writing plugins.
Can you link the URL onto this Markdown doc?
Yeah, I will put a link to it in my class notes. Okay. Now, I mentioned earlier pathogen. Pathogen is a really handy way of managing plugins. There is another one that from what I've heard, is much better. I have simply not moved over to it yet. And it is called Vundle with a V. It is spelled as such. You can see it here. It's really handy because instead of like installing your plugins, you just do something like bundle, then a GitHub repo, I think it is, but I'm not entirely sure. So look that up. Supposedly it's better. Supposedly it makes things a lot easier, but that's not the one I'm going to tell you about today. What I'm going to tell you about today is called pathogen. And what you do is you take this plugin, and it's going to be the only file in your autoload directory. Autoload is a bit like the plugins directory. So all it does is this will essentially be the only plugin that you install manually ever again. So you install this, and then you put these lines in your VimRC. Now, whenever you want to install a plugin, instead of you downloading a zip file and then moving all the files to the right place, you can see here, all you do is, I just have a directory where it is. So for example, if this was a zip file, I would just unzip into my bundle directory, and I would have it like that. Now, this is where Git submodules come in. So if you're using Git to manage your Vim files, which I highly recommend, I use Vim to manage all of my dot files, and Vim happens to be a subfolder of that. But if you're using Vim, or using Git to version your Vim files, and you want to install a plugin, all you do is, for example, let's find, I already have this one installed, but I'll just show you how you would install otherwise. So you're going to go to GitHub, or whatever Git repo you want. I'm going to take Bad Wolf. Let's get out of here. I'm going to go into my appropriate repo, which is .files. Now, when you're adding a Git submodule, you have to be in the root of the repo. So if I look here, you can see my Vim directory is down here. I want to install my plugin at .vim bundle badwolf2.git. Right? I already have badwolf.git in there. That's what I installed there. So what you do is git submodule add, and then you're going to give it the repo like that you just copied from GitHub, and then a destination, which is .vim bundle badwolf2.git. And once that finishes, congratulations, you just installed a Vim plugin.
Wow.
Now
Is
when
submodule the additional part from pathogen?
no, submodule is part of Git.
Part of it. Okay.
Yeah. So submodule is like, if you're familiar with SVN or CVS, is like a remote. So that's an entire Git repo in and of itself inside. Like if I actually went to that directory, .vim bundle badwolf2.git, you'll notice that the changed files are different because I'm inside another repo inside my repo. So that's exactly what a submodule is.
Does it tell the main repo not to track the changes of that repo directory?
What a submodule is it just says take the current commit ID of head of that repo and point it to here. So if I never changed anything, and I just did git submodule init, all it would do is it would always point to that commit. So if they updated their code, I would have to go into my submodule.vim bundle, badwolf.git, for example. You'll notice that it's pointing to a specific commit ID. If I wanted to make it point to the most updated code, I would just check out the master and git pull. That's it. That's all you have to do. So if you want to update submodules, just do a git pull. Is there any questions on that? On pathogen as a whole?
So like if you're at the main repo,
Yeah.
your dot files, git status will not show you any of these changes that you just pulled?
It will tell me that I'm pointing to a new commit ID.
Oh, okay, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, pretty smart.
Like if I move back up, you'll see new commits, and that's what it'll say.
Yep.
And then when you commit that, it'll actually commit the new pointer. So when someone else pulls this down, it'll point to the same code.
Okay, that's nice.
Yep. Right.
Why don't we do that? Why don't we do that at work?
That's a whole other discussion.
Okay, I was about to ask the same question.
That's-
I was wondering about.
That's
off topic.
it's a can of worms right there.
WWVorg.
Yeah. Well, there are other reasons. I mean, it's a good idea, but not my decision. Yeah. So anyway, moving on. The plugins that I use. Now, I use a lot of plugins. I'm just going to cover the ones that I think are absolutely fundamental. Like, they change Vim in such a way that they're almost required. I think they should be like built into Vim in the next release. So I'll go over here. So the first one is Nerd Tree. Nerd Tree is like the best thing since sliced bread. So if you don't have any plugins installed, let's see if I can figure out how to start it without my dot files. Safe. Read only mode, I don't want that. Silent mode, I don't want that. I just don't want to parse my VMRC. Anyway, so if you don't start, or if you have Vim, actually, I'll just Google it really quickly. I don't care. Vim safe mode start.
Now when I hit Shift G, it centers right in the middle.
Vim-u none. Alright, that's probably bad. So anyway, actually I'll just do this. Vim bundle. B. Okay, so if by default when you open up Vim, this is what happens if you try to open a directory. Just show you what I did. I just did vim dot. This is what it looks like. I mean, you can do stuff like you can hit enter, and you can hit the double dot, and you can move. You can sort of move around directories. This is okay. I mean, it'll get the job done. But there,
Kind of like that.
yeah, it's a bit like that. It'll get the job done. It's just not pretty. Nerd tree will give you a directory tree like most people are used to in an editor. So if you're in something like Eclipse and you have that nice side pane with the directory tree, and like you can click on stuff and it'll open those files. That's what nerd tree is. So if I bring it back, note that you don't need 2 directories. I just happen to have 2 and I don't know which is the right one. So now, if I target the current directory, I get this. And it is a very nice tree structure. And I can hit T to open a new tab. I can hit GT to open silently a new tab, like this, GT. G Shift T? Shift T? There you go, Shift T, and it'll open it silently. It'll open a new tab, but it won't move me to that tab. Now, this doesn't seem that useful until you're in a file, and if I do nerd tree here, nerd tree, it opens up on the left. And I can move between my code and my directory structure on the left here. And I can hit enter and it'll open it in the left pane. And I can go over here and it'll open it in the left pane. So if you're used to something like Eclipse and having the files on the left side and you want to navigate through that, that's what nerd tree is for. It is really great. Now, not only this, you can do stuff like you can add a directory, you can delete files, you can copy files, all while inside of Vim.
That's my remaining 20 to 30%.
Yeah. Really, really useful plugin. Like, this should be default functionality in Vim because it's so game-changing. Because people will come into Vim from Eclipse or Zen Studio or something like, oh, well, I need my directory structure so I can open files easier. Well, this is it right here. Because I'll show you my workflow very quickly. I have a video of this up on my YouTube channel if you want to see it in more detail.
What's your YouTube name?
YouTube.com/sabiddle. So what I do is, for example, I'm just going to go into this directory here. If I'm going to start working on a project, I'm just going to go into my repo and then open the current directory. And now from here, I can, for example, open this and then open the file I want to work on. Let's go into source. And this is it. I'm in my quote unquote project. I'm in Vim working on a project. Just so awesome. It's because I'm using Vim as a pseudo IDE. It's not really an IDE because it's not integrated. But this gives you a lot of the features that people complain about Vim not having. So that's the first one. Any questions about nerd tree? If you're wondering where to install it, just literally Google nerd tree.
Can you toggle off the directory while you're comfortably working on that?
Yeah. So if I do, I open this and I go nerd tree. So there's nerd tree and nerd tree close. Now it should be noted that this ties really well with the mappings bit that we went over earlier. So you can, there might even be mappings built in. I just don't know them, right?
For short, like nerd tree commands?
Yeah, like mappings that you could do, like you could make your own mapping that did like leader n to open nerd tree, and then leader n again to toggle it, because there is a nerd tree toggle, I think. Nerd tree toggle, yeah. So there's nerd tree and nerd tree toggle. So you could just make a mapping that was like \n that would do nerd tree toggle, and that would open and close nerd tree. That probably exists by default in nerd tree. Help. And I just don't know it. So yeah, just Google nerd tree. You'll find it here. It's up on GitHub. Screw loose /nerd tree, and you can follow the steps we covered earlier to install it via Git submodule. That's the first one. The next one is Easy Motion. I went over this very briefly earlier. This so fundamentally changes the way you move around in Vim.
Which is Easy Motion.
Easy Motion, right? So I covered this earlier. So if I open source player.js, right? And I move around stuff. And I'm on this line. and I want to move to like the sixth A or something, I could do FA semicolon until I got there. Or I could do like 3FA or something like that. But I'm probably going to miss on the first time is the point. What easy motion does is if I do leader F or leader and then emotion, I could do leader T, leader F, etc. It's going to do this. So it's going to show a mask of all the other characters and replace my search with sequential letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, etc. That's how I sing the alphabet song. So now if I just hit D, it's going to take me exactly where I wanted to go, which is here. Huge time saver, because I could have done, like I said, 3FA. That isn't where I wanted to go. Oh, okay, it's 4FA. When you could have just done \FA.
Okay.
And the bonus about this is that it works across lines, which F doesn't. So if I did like \FZ, that was a bad example, it's not there. \F shift A. It's going to find two of them here. It's going to find A and B. Now I couldn't have done that with just F alone because F only looks on the current line. So the easy motion just adds on to the awesome functionality by searching across lines.
It goes backwards.
Yeah, so if I do \FA, it'll move me backwards. The alphabet goes backwards too, so if you're practicing for a sobriety test, this is a very good way to do it. So if I just hit Q, I'm going to jump over there. Really, really awesome plugin. Like, the guy that got this should get the Vim equivalent of a Nobel Prize. I don't know what that would be, but he should get it. Likewise, when you want to install it, just Google Easy Motion, Vim, and then it'll probably bring up GitHub on the first result. It'll bring up this, which will then link to a GitHub. Now, the awesome thing about Easy Motion, it's written about this by this guy, Local Talk. Now, he also wrote the next plugin that I'm going to cover, which is Powerline. Jesus, there's a lot of flies in here.
Yeah.
Now, Powerline is what makes my status line so damn pretty. Super pretty. So if I open up my VimRC, actually, I don't even need to open my VimRC. I'll just do this. This might be in settings. Yeah. Oh. So I'm going to comment this out. All right. So when you first install Powerline, it's going to look like this. Without the fancy arrow keys. Now, this alone is really cool because I'm in normal mode, and it shows I'm in normal mode down here. It's going to color my status line differently if I'm in insert mode, which is really nice. And it's going to show my current file type, or file ending, file encoding, or my file type, then my file encoding, then the syntax I'm currently on, the percent of the file I'm currently at. So if I just scroll, if I scroll down a bit, it's going to show like I'm 10% through a file. It's going to show the line number I'm on, and then the column I'm on. So if I go here, it'll show the column I'm on and line number, etc. Now, if you have Fugitive installed, which is the next one I'm going to go over, it'll also show the Git branch I'm on, which is really nice, and then obviously the file name. Powerline is really awesome, and it's written by the same guy that did Easy Motion. So go to his stuff and Vim Powerline and install it just like any other plugin. Now the next one is Fugitive. Vim Fugitive. So all this does, it's a bunch of Git commands for Vim. So for example, I'm in this right here. Oh, that was the one I wanted. And the commands start with G. So if I did G in tab, you can see a bunch of stuff like G blame, G browse, G commit, diff, etc. I'm just going to do G log in here. Nope, that didn't work the way I wanted it to. G blame. Blame works better. So if I do a G blame, it's going to bring up another window. It's going to have the git blame next to my file, and it's going to match the lines. So for example, I'm on, all of this is me, but I can see the commit ID where it changed versus this is just me, but I think this is much prettier than this.
Yeah, a lot easier to read.
Yeah. Not only that, I can move through here, and it'll make this read only. But it just, for me, it makes it a lot easier to move around and see what's going on. That is Fugitive. Really awesome. Let's see what else I got here. That's pretty much it. Those are the three that I would consider absolutely mandatory if you're working in Vim these days.
What's PHP complete.vim?
Where's what now?
PHP complete.vim.
That is a plugin I wrote and currently maintain.
It's gotta be crap then.
Horrible.
It is.
Look at all of them. Do you see all of them?
Oh, what now?
Flies.
It's because of the light.
Oh, yeah.
I'm ignoring it.
So that is, I'm pretty sure it's my most followed repo on GitHub. So it's just, I updated the Omni completion for PHP to do stuff that it couldn't do before.
Cool.
So yeah, I wouldn't consider that mandatory, especially because if you find bugs, I don't want to fix them. That's pretty much it.
Do you maintain your MUD still?
I do occasionally. There's actually 2 or 3 other people working on it at the moment.
2 or 300?
No, other people.
Oh.
I think there's like 20.
Is this the one you introduced in the game development, or the not the game development, but the one of the original Project Mustang?
Yeah, it was. I think it's. Let's see. It's so far off topic. I don't care though. Yeah, it's my second most followed repo, and has the most forks, I think. But yeah, there's a couple other people working on it at the moment that are not me because I've been lazy. Anyway, the last thing is where to find them. We briefly covered this. Vim.org is probably the best place. Secondly is word of mouth. Just ask people what they're using. You can go to reddit.com/r/vim, which is really great in my opinion. You'll find a ton of info, new plugins like DWM, which I mentioned briefly earlier today, was featured there. You'll get a bunch of tips. You can ask questions. You'll be able to see new plugins and new color schemes and provide feedback, etc. So Vim.org and the Vim subreddit are really awesome. So any questions about anything I covered today?
Can you repeat everything?
I have a lot of reading to do. So.
I'm good, actually. That was really good.
Yeah.
I will repeat everything once I hit stop and then it records. Then you can watch the video again.
Yeah.
How about the feature that shows you the line characters of just the current line you're on? I mean, I've
The line characters?
I've set the invisible characters on and off before by using that the list cars
Right.
customization and stuff. But it looked like in your editor you had it just follow your current line.
Oh, okay. So you mean me highlighting my current line?
Oh.
Do you mean me highlighting the line I'm on?
It's a little of both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's 2 settings.
Mm-hmm.
There's cursor line, which is the setting that I haven't enabled. There's another one called cursor column.
Yeah, which you don't always have it.
And if I do that, my color scheme isn't really supporting it at the moment. But you'll see that it's highlighting the column I'm on,
Oh.
which is sometimes useful. I used to have this enabled all the time. The problem with it is if you're moving through a large file, it really, really slows down the rendering speed.
I gotcha.
If I'm moving through a big file, it gets super laggy. So if I'm moving through a lot of stuff, I tend to turn it off and then move through and then turn it back on. But yeah, that's set cursor column, which is the short is CUC and CUL. Yeah.
Okay. And then at one point I was dealing with when I was using the visual mode selection and the PuTTY right click buffers, like I turned that on and off because it was copying the visual characters around with the text.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there's really just don't do that. Right?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm in PuTTY and I need to copy something from Vim, what I do is this. Like I'm in Vim and I have these weird characters. So if I'm in PuTTY and I try to copy, it's going to copy those weird characters. It's also going to copy the line numbers.
Sure.
So what you do is I have these 3 commands. I do set nanu, which is no numbers,
Yep.
no list, which is going to turn off the weird characters, and then fold column equals 0. So there's actually a really tiny hidden column over here.
Oh, really?
So if I do this, now I can copy with PuTTY the actual text.
What was that one again?
So there's set nanu.
And all 3 of those are built-in Vim capabilities?
Yeah, they're all built in.
Now the fold column, is that the expansion with certain characters like minus?
It can be
Or some other character?
It can be minus. So if I go into here, for example, you'll notice in my fold column, I get a minus sign and then a big like arrow key.
Yeah.
Oh, and you'll see another one here. And then I'll get the level. So if I actually click that, it's going to collapse it. Now you don't have to click it. You can do, this is called folding. So if you just do help folding, it'll show you the keys to press. But you can do ZC to close a fold, ZO to open a fold, G Shift C to close recursively, etc. It doesn't work too well in JavaScript, but if you're in PHP, it works really well. For example, see if I can go into, let's find one that I worked on recently. That is not.
I saw those collapsed in files when I opened them.
Yeah. If they're collapsed in files when you open them, just do Z Shift O or and that'll open all folds recursively. You can also turn off folding. Personally, I like it, but there are a bunch of fold methods, so you can define how it folds things.
Okay.
So you can say, let whatever syntax I'm using define it. So fold based on functions and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was a feature of
Yeah.
IDEs that I kind of liked at some
Yeah.
point because it helps you visualize what the functionality is, not the details.
The other 2 methods are indent, so you can have it fold no matter where it is, just based on how far it's indented. And then the last one is marker. So if you've ever opened a file and it had like 3 braces in a comment, and then further down the line it had like 3 right braces in a comment,
Okay.
that's Vim folding, because Vim will open that and we'll see that and like, oh, okay, that's a fold. I don't care how I'm indented or what syntax I'm in. I'm just going to try to fold that. So those are the 3 fold methods. You can, if you do help folding in Vim, you'll get a big help file on it. Anything else? Right. We covered. What's that?
Must read more.
Yes. Like always, we've covered a lot. So feel free to rewatch this video again or look up on those plugins. Or the best way to do it is just read the help files. Like help folding, help
Sounds right.
mapping, a ton of stuff. Like the Vim help files are amazing as far as editors go. Like I don't know if any other editor has better help files than Vim does.
Do you still follow a certain procedure every time you get on a new host to extract your GitHub.file structure?
Pretty much. Like I'll get to a new host. I don't have one yet. I should probably make one. Is like a symlink script, because what I do right now is I'll go to a new machine and I'll clone my .files repo, and then I'll have to really annoyingly just symlink all the files. I should probably just write a script that does that for me. But yeah, that's my general workflow is just for a new machine is pull down my .files and then symlink all of them. I think that's it. Without anything else?
Where are we going next week? So I can study.
Next week is workflow. So you've been using Vim for a month. Bring in your questions about stuff you've run into. Maybe you want to know how to do something that you think Vim can do, but you're not sure how to do it, or something you wish Vim could do, or something that you've been struggling with, or you're just wondering the best way to accomplish something. Yeah. In addition to that, if there isn't enough questions, I'll just cover how I work in Vim and stuff like that.
Oh, I have questions.
Okay, good. I'm going to cancel the recording now. I'll see you guys next week.